So what is going on with Zillow? Oh my gosh, have you been watching this? Have you been following the drama that is Zillow? So if you don't know what Zillow is it's basically started off as a search engine for houses. They take the information off of the MLS feeds and they put together their own feed that goes across the whole country, or it might go internationally. I'm not really sure. And they put out in a lot of information for the public to see. And they have a Zestimate. And the Zestimate has been long debated, or even hated, really, because it's not always accurate. In fact, most of the time, the Zestimates are not accurate. But that's besides the point. That's not what this video is about. So what this video is about is, so what I'm looking at now is a few weeks, maybe month and a half. Anyway, an agent in Las Vegas did a really funny TikTok video about Zillow. And, like, what if Zillow this? What if Zillow that?
Yes. What if there was a company that everybody knew of to look for houses?
Even though it's funny, there's a lot of accurate points in it. He's not wrong. So while it's funny, I mean, it's hysterical. If you haven't watched it, you got to watch it. So anyway, so shortly after he put out that video, like days, I think it was 2 days later, 3 days later, I can't remember the exact timeline, it gets announced that Zillow is putting a pause on their iBuying program. So what iBuying is Zillow will make a cash offer to a buyer who wants to sell their house quickly. They say that it's less fees, that the seller still gets a good amount of money. And obviously some people have been taking up Zillow on their offers because they now own thousands of homes, this from their iBuyer program. However, nobody could quite figure out why Zillow was paying so much money to the sellers for these homes, because they clearly weren't worth that amount of money. So it was a little strange. Why would they do that? There was speculation in the TikTok video.
$300,000. So they buy all of these homes for $300,000, and then on the 31st home, they buy it for $340,000.
The agent speculated that it was because they would dominate a certain neighborhood. Once they got enough volume of homes, they could then start selling them a little bit higher and a little bit higher. And then they would be changing the Zestimate to get higher. And then by the time they sold their large amount of homes, that they would have made a huge amount of profit, but artificially inflating the prices. And that
they paid $340,000 for this 31st home, whenever they've only paid $300,000 for these others. Well, what that just did is create a new comp. So when they go to sell these other 30 homes,
the Zestimate,
that extra $40,000 that you can say this one sold for $340,000 just made them $1.2 million off that one neighbor.
I don't want to comment too much on that because that really wasn't the point, but I'm trying to figure out this timeline. So let's take a look real quick. So here's an article that came out on Bloomberg on October the 17th. And this was just 2-3 days after that TikTok video, and where Zillow announces that they were putting a pause on their iBuyer program. So they were saying that they were stopping it. They weren't saying that it had failed. They weren't saying any of that. They were saying, and here's a quote right here, that their iBuyer operation has hit its capacity for 2021. So there was a lot of talk back and forth about this. Like, has it really hit capacity? Are they really finished for the year? And, it was pointed out that in the first or second quarter of the year, second quarter, that they had bought a huge amount of homes, like 3,800 homes, which is way more than they had bought in the previous quarter or the previous year. So there was speculation that, well, they just bought all their homes. They maxed out what they were planning to buy so early on in the year that they didn't need to buy any more homes the rest of 2021. So the iBuyer program, so it's not going away, is what they said. It's not going to go away. They're just pausing it. And they also blamed, there was some talk about not being able to have the contractors to keep up with flipping these houses and not having the materials, because there is definitely a shortage of materials. So there was that. So it was like, okay, all right, Zillow, maybe we believe you. I guess that could be the reason. So anyway, so this article came out, followed up with a bunch of other ones. Chief Operating Officer of Zillow saying we're operating within labor and supply constraints in this economy, construction, renovation, that kind of thing. We are not exempt from these market capacity issues. Of course, yeah, I'm paraphrasing here. This is not the exact quote. Based on this, shares of one of Zillow's competitors, which is Open Door, went up 7.9% after this announcement. And they're saying, hey, you know what? We're still doing our iBuyer program. So, okay, that's kind of interesting. Now let's take a look at what happened yesterday. So everything changed yesterday. The market hasn't changed that much. So I don't know why anything would change so drastically. But the CEO of Zillow has a little bit of a different story. Apparently, Zillow is no longer going to be in iBuying. It's not just a pause. They're going to liquidate all of their homes that they bought. They're going to get rid of them. Fire sale at Zillow. So if there's a home in your neighborhood that Zillow owns, go buy it. Might get a good deal. So now Zillow is saying, nope, we're getting out. So this is just not even a month later? A month after it was the constraints of construction, constraints of product, and they had already bought all the houses they had planned to buy for the year. Now, just a few weeks later, they're just getting rid of the whole department altogether. In fact, they're laying off 2,000 employees. So let's see what he had to say.
Is this a sort of full-scale admission that you should never have gone into that business line in the first place?
He really looks uncomfortable, doesn't he?
It was a really tough but necessary decision, Wilfred. And I guess first and foremost, the decision to wind down our Zillow Offers iBuying operation involves a layoff of about 25% of the workforce. And that is a heavy thing, given all of the people involved and all of the work they've put in. And we're committed to a smooth transition there. So I just wanted to say that up front. But this was a necessary decision. We just determined that being an iBuyer was too risky, too volatile, and ultimately addressed too few customers, too narrow.
That's interesting. So in a matter of weeks, less than a month, it wasn't the inventory. It wasn't the availability of products. It wasn't the availability of contractors. It was the volatility. Okay. So maybe Zillow just doesn't always tell the truth.
So I mean, I guess some could have suggested to you before you did it that it's going to be volatile and unpredictable and obviously change the sort of predictability of your earnings flow. So to what extent was this a sort of I told you so moment to some people that said that in the first place?
I'm sure there are those that told me that. And I'm sure there are those out there wagging their fingers at me right now.
Workforce. This is what Jim said about that home buying model is this right, April of 2019?
Yeah.
Take a listen to this.
Maybe Rich Barton can orchestrate a phenomenal turnaround at Zillow. I'm glad he's running things again. But I think this headlong rush into the house flipping business could prove to be very risky. And even if it works, there will absolutely be some brutal speed bumps along the way.
Justified. We went into the business as a big swing on the bet that we could actually predict.
They pay $340. This 31st home, they've only paid $300 for these others. Well, what that just did is create a new comp. So when they go to sell these other 30 homes,
His estimate.
that extra $40,000 that you can say this one sold for $340 just made them $1.2 million.
The price of a home 6 months into the future and do so with a very narrow margin of error and have our hold times be very short. And
Okay, that's really interesting. They were predicting that they could predict cost of the houses in the future. Now, kind of makes you go back to that Las Vegas agent's TikTok where he was saying they were not just that they were predicting it, but they were manipulating it, because if they bought up a certain neighborhood and they owned all those houses, and then they could sort of control, even if they only sold it 5, 10,000, 20,000 over the price it had previously, you do that with enough houses, that's a big chunk of change.
Just made them $1.2 million.
So prediction of the future? No, but manipulation of the future prices? Possibly. Probably. Why did they stop? Did they stop doing it because of that TikTok video? Because everybody called them out on it? Is there some legal issue that could be with that? I don't know. Maybe.
What's happened is COVID happened. We've had a global pandemic. We've had a housing
Now he's blaming COVID.
market that froze up initially, and now we've seen a
Froze up initially for a very short period of time. I don't think it affected your iBuying program.
growth rate and acceleration rate in the housing market that we've never before witnessed in history. Yeah. And as you might imagine,
and that's true because we've seen prices skyrocket. So I'm not really sure how or why that would make their purchases and their flips and their iBuyer program a problem. You would think that that would actually make it better. I can't think of a market situation that would, where this would be a bad thing for them. The fact that the prices are increasing, shouldn't that be good for the Zillow program? I'm confused. That's weird.
That has made predicting the price of a home 6 months into the future really difficult. And we're doing it at a scale that is 1/10 what it needs to be in order to get to the scale we think we need to achieve to offer good prices. So we stepped back, we assessed, we looked at the volatility in our earnings that we're reporting today, and we said, hey, we don't need to be doing this. We sit in a privileged spot in a mover's decision-making process. We get a good look at all of these movers, and we now have a whole bunch of tools that we can get them to move in a more asset-light way.
So as a result, so Bloomberg's reporting today that you have 7,000 homes to sell for $2.8 billion and that you're pitching it to all sorts of institutional investors. Can you confirm that? And separately, a KeyBank analyst said most of those homes are underwater.
So now I'm really confused. How are those 7,000 homes that they own underwater? He just said, and we all know that we were in a market that has been increasing. So if they had paid fair market value for those homes when they bought them in their iBuyer program, they should be worth more now. That doesn't make any sense. Even if they hadn't done a single thing to them, the market has increased. Those homes should be worth more, right? Why are they underwater? Could that be the artificial inflating?
Always sold the homes that we've had in inventory in all ways, including the regular market and including to these kinds of buyers. We've always done that. And we are not, I will tell you, we're not in any kind of a fire sale mood. We're not in a big hurry to sell these homes. We're going to do it in an orderly fashion. These are appreciating homes. They are real assets, and we will wind down our inventory in an orderly way. We are in a big hurry. What we are in a big hurry to do is get them ready to be sold, to get them closed, to get them renovated, and to get them back on the market.
Now, here's a report from today on the Zillow situation. I don't even know what to call it. Zillow drama, maybe?
Zillow Group down 15% this morning, obviously getting out of the iBuying business. $500 million write-down. Wow.
They cut 25% of their workforce, and I felt that when I listened to the call, the level of arrogance that oozed through that conference call was for Zillow. For
last
Barton,
night?
Yeah, it was really kind of painful. As I felt the closing bell interview with Barton was painful. I wasn't buying what he was selling.
So that's really interesting what's going on. So, you may not know this, but Zillow is actually now started to be a broker. So they have, they always said they weren't going to compete with real estate agents. And so agents have been paying them for advertising for years. And so a huge amount of Zillow's profits and money comes from agents paying them to be at the top of their list, their premier agent list. And this has always been a big controversy among real estate agents. And, some people say don't do it because their plan is to put us out of business. And they thought that they could have their computerized system buying and selling houses. And, well, maybe this is the first step in them recorrecting that thought process. But here's what let's watch a little bit of that Las Vegas agents video because it's pretty funny. It's just entertaining. And it's right on too.
Let's talk about the housing crisis. And let's talk about some what. And everybody goes on there and searches for houses when they're bored and stuff. And so that company, they just sit back and they just collect all the data. They just know what zip code is looking at what zip code and how much those people can afford. Everyone's looking at this one zip code. Everybody seems to be able to afford this certain amount. And let's say that billion-dollar company uses that information to go into that zip code and start purchasing houses.
So what do you think? Was this agent predicting something that was to come down the line? It's pretty amazing. But I think he was right on at the time. I think he hit the nail on the head. And his video went viral, and it's hysterical. And it's a great video. And because he said it and he put it out there in a really funny way, what a lot of real estate agents were already thinking. And it's been why agents don't like this estimate and why we try to have people understand that a Zestimate isn't always accurate. So what does this mean for Zillow moving forward? Are the 2,000 people that they have laid off, are they the agents that they hired to buy and sell these houses? Are they still going to be buying and selling? Because they became members of the local real estate boards and the National Real Estate Board. Was it just for their iBuyer program? Are they going to be a brokerage now? They kind of already are. So what's going to happen? Guess we got to wait and see. I just want to put this out there. If you're thinking about buying or selling your home, don't go to Zillow, obviously. Don't go to the list of the premier agents either. They're only a premier agent. They're only on that preferred list because they're paying to be there. They're giving big bucks, and it's like thousands a month. It's not just, well, it depends on the market, but a lot of them are thousands of dollars a month that they're giving to Zillow and giving to Dave Ramsey's and giving to all these lists that say, hey, we have these agents. They're vetted agents. You know what? Vet your own agent. Don't just pick one off a list because that agent paid for the top spot. It just doesn't make sense. You have no idea if they're good or not. So don't do it that way. There's better ways. Get a recommendation. Ask a friend. Call somebody you know. Ask me. I'll give you one in your area who I actually know and I work with. I work with thousands of agents and I'm in communication with a lot of them all the time. So I'll give you a recommendation. Just ask.